Well, you've made it past the guards. But you're too late. With Scorpio Maximus complete, my plans for world domination are not but guaranteed. How could I do such a thing? It's quite simple, really. Actually, it wasn't. There's a lot that goes into making this kind of stuff. Hey, you know what? Pull up a chair, I can show how I made it. This is an empty spool with 3D printed filament. I've been wanting to use one of these for something, so I'm going to use it for the cephalothorax of this scorpion. And then for the legs, I'm thinking about using these disemboweled deodorant sticks. They're made of this smooth, shiny plastic that doesn't always play nice with superglue, so you'll want to sand that kind of stuff down. This is a sheet of EVA foam. You'll be seeing a lot of this throughout the build. EVA foam works really well with superglue, so it's used a lot in scratch building to stick two different kinds of materials together. I'm cutting some thin strips of foam to fill in these divots so I can bridge the gap with a popsicle stick. After that, I'm slapping another piece of foam onto the stick and then winding some wire around it. The idea was that the wires could help plan out the legs or something. They end up being pretty much useless in the legs, but they do prove useful for the arms. You'll see that later. Anyways, now we've got 10 of these things. 8 for the legs and 2 for the arms. But before I can affix these appendages to the body, I need something to fill the spool. This is a bunch of 3D printer detritus that I've been hoarding. It'll make for a pretty good filler material. Once it's all wrapped up, it can be glued into the spool. This is the lid to a jug of orange juice. I've used the same part for the mouth on Kaiser head cannon, the previous scratch build, but this time I'm going to use the whole thing as a face, minus the cap. And this is the first attempt at attaching stuff to the body. The leg is glued to a piece of foam that's stuck onto the foil, while the head is glued into that crevice between the spool and the foil. Neither of those were solid connections, so I ripped them out and tried something else. Okay, take 2. Gonna try using some sticks to build up a more rigid structure. And now I've got the head glued on with some sticks and foam. Gonna do something similar for the limbs. Add some foam, space things out, and then glue some stuff together. This works fine for the arms, since they can stay level with the body, but I'm going to want the legs up at various angles. The deodorant stick got glued to the spool where it met, and then I did the same sort of popsicle stick thing I did with the arms. And now the scorpion's got a full set of its first leg segments. Fact: scorpions do not have teeth. I'm going to give this one some chompers anyways, using this plastic ring from some kind of bottle cap and some toothpicks. Now that's a smile you can trust. Scorpions have these pincer-looking things in their mouths called chelicerae, which might look different in other arthropods. I'll be making them out of bread clips. Just gotta cut them in half and stick them back together to make them look more pincer-esque. And then add some additional parts to make them look more armular. These little hemispheric beads are so small that I have to pick them up with an X-Acto knife. There are some other tools you can use for this, but this is what I got on hand. This is the bottom part of a different kind of deodorant stick. I'm gonna use it as the back part of the mouth, but it doesn't fit. I also want to tilt the head down a little bit, so I gotta do some impromptu jaw surgery. At first I was going to glue the head back in place like this with the tooth capsule, but I gotta paint this thing before I install it. I also added some foam panels to cover up the foil, which will help me glue the teeth into place later. Painting the insides of the mouth is going to be next to impossible once the head's fully assembled, so I primed it black along with the teeth parts. Time to color the tooth capsule. It's going to be painted purple with some silver for the teeth as well as some weathering on the inside of the mouth. I used that same silver to paint some of the inner mouth parts on the scorpion proper. And then I applied this rust wash to the capsule. And here it is glued together. Kinda looks like a barnacle from Half-Life. And the back of the mouth it goes. I'm going to use this part from a War of the Worlds kit as the bottom of the mouth. It fits in there pretty nicely. It had been a while since I painted anything, so this was me attempting to paint some kind of gradient, getting frustrated with my inability to paint a nice gradient, and then spraying the whole thing with isopropyl alcohol to see what would happen. It actually made a pretty neat looking pattern when it had dried, but you could barely see it once actually in the mouth, so I probably could have just left the original paint job as is. Ah well. I'll finish up the paint on the mouth by silvering up the chelicerae and most of the surrounding face, followed by some more of that rust wash. Most of that's going to get painted over later, so I don't really know why I did that. Next up, I took a bead, cut it in half, put some foam around the edges, and then stuck it onto the face to make eyes. At some point later they're gonna vanish, because I don't really like how they look. Let's get back to the legs. I'm using these deodorant stick lids for the first set of joints. I wanted to thread the wires through these parts, and had the bright idea to use a punch to, well, punch holes in them. That was not a good idea, and I don't recommend you try it because the plastic was pretty brittle and shattered a few times. I ended up having to glue a bunch of stuff back together, and also accidentally stabbed myself in the hand, so that wasn't fun. I did eventually get the hang of it, but still, don't try this at home. Getting back to business, I glued some foam to the joints to help them adhere to the limb stumps, and threaded them onto the wires from earlier. And now, time for the tail. I'm going to start with this shampoo bottle, glued on at an angle using some foam and the orange juice cap I tore off the lid earlier. That connection seemed a bit weak, so I reinforced it with a few sticks. Circling back to the front of the scorpion, I've got the bottom of the mouth glued in, and I'm going to use some bits of EVA foam to cover up any gaps between the mouth parts. And now I'm starting to build up some more structure on the underside with even more foam and some popsicle sticks. I want to continue this extrusion down the center of the body, starting with these deodorant stick lids. I cut up the lid to a thing of cream cheese and bridged the gap with some more popsicle sticks. The center has some give to it, so I wanted to stick something in there to keep it held down, which I achieved using a couple of bottle caps, a popsicle stick, and some more foam. Now I'm starting to add some volume to the shape using a cut-up container lid. I've also added another deodorant stick to the back to help fill out the shape near the base of the tail. And here we are quite a while later with quite a lot of foam plastered all over the underside. You'll see a few passes of this process, each time with some new colors of foam being added. I also stuck this large part onto the tail from that War of the Worlds kit I mentioned earlier. I thought it'd be really funny to keep that sticker on the final model, so I've secured it under a clear plastic lens-looking thing from Deodorant Stick. This giant killer robot plants one tree, and then it can do whatever it wants afterwards. I'm thinking of using this old phone receiver for the next part of the tail. But first, more foam panels. I'm going to use the speaker cover thing, whatever it's called, from the phone, somewhere in the center of the body. Here's what I'm thinking for the layout, using some more lids. And here's everything all glued down with some more foam. These triangular bits are from the lid of the shampoo bottle. And now I've added some more model kit parts to fill in some space at the sides and to make a turret. This arm is going to hold another turret, glued into the shampoo bottle using a stick. The cannon is a piece from a Junkbot set. I'm using another Junkbots piece with some beads glued on as a periscope that sticks out of the top of the body. And then I went and built a larger turret out of a whole bunch of stuff, including a knob, one of those plastic stopper things you pull out of a bottle cap, and a bullet casing, among other things. And then it's another layer of foam to fill in some gaps and add some more detail. The receiver received a smattering of EVA panels, plus a couple more parts from that War of the Worlds kit to bulk it out a bit on one end. Thinking of putting it on at an angle kind of like this. Here's what it looks like after it's been installed and entombed in some more foam to really secure it in place. Now for the stinger. I'm going to start with this honey bottle, but instead of a needle-looking thing that injects venom, I'm going to give this guy a giant laser cannon. For the barrel of the cannon, I'll be using this laundry detergent cap with this power cord stuck into the top. I'm planning on wrapping the cable around the tail like this, like it's part of some kind of cooling loop. And now we've got some more greeblies, and more foam. These greeblies include things like model kit parts, electronics, clips, washers, and some other bits of plastic and metal. Plastic utensils don't play nice with superglue. I learned that the hard way when I tried using them as leg bones for the Plague Machine, another previous scratch build. You could use this antipathy to adhesives to your advantage when you're gluing on rivets. I'm going to be spending a considerable amount of time skewering these tiny hemispheric beads with an X-Acto knife, dipping them in a small puddle of superglue in a plastic spoon, and sticking them onto various points on the model. With the power of the spoon, I won't have to worry about any of these beads accidentally affixing themselves to my vessel of adhesive. And now, a word. Montage. Camera battery died. No big deal, right? I can just go charge it. Nope. Power went out. No lights, no camera, but there's still action. The grind stops for nothing. So there I was, gluing tiny beads to a pile of junk, hunched over in the dark like a cave goblin for several hours. It's the next day, the power's back, and here are all the rivets I added to the model, plus the cable glued into place. I had the very cool idea to add rivets to the entire underside of the Scorpion, even though you'll barely be able to see any of them in the final product. But first, I wanted to get the topside out of the way. Oh, whoops, missed a spot. There we go. Also got started on the undercarriage. And sometime later, it's all done. There's an absolutely inhumane amount of beads on this thing. Now it's back to the foam mines. This batch should help reinforce the joints and provide a good surface to attach the next set of segments to. I'm out of deodorant stick cylinders, so I'll be improvising using a paper towel tube with some wire mesh glued into it. I made 8 new segments and then glued them to the body, plus even more foam. I added some more stuff to really make sure those legs are going to be stable. Alright, time for the last set of leg joints, using the bottom parts of the deodorant sticks wrapped in foam along with the spinal cords of those deodorant sticks for the feet. And look at that, it can actually stand on its own. Let's get to the claws, starting with these plastic knives. You can see I roughed them up a bunch, so superglue can actually stick to them. I'm sticking some more sticks to this to build up a skeleton for the claw. And now the wires are actually useful, they're holding the claws in place. I'm building up the volume of the claws using a whole bunch of foam. And here's the second pass of foam. I added a whole bunch around the wrists to match the thickness of the arms. In the final act of foaming, I'm continuing the knee pad sort of motif across the rest of the leg parts. Next up are the limb rivets, starting with the underside. And then the top side. All these gaps need to be filled, and some aluminum foil should take care of that. And now I've mummified the joints using bits of shop towel, with some bottle caps acting like giant pins. If you're going to skin stuff using shop towels, I highly recommend you seal them in place using Mod Podge or something before you paint it, to avoid the towels potentially peeling up as the paint dries. And, I forgot to do that here. But anyways, that concludes the build of Scorpio Maximus. Now it's time for the paint. It starts with a prime and a zenithal highlight. I ran out of black spray paint while I was painting this, so I'm going to go in and paint those exposed parts by hand. I don't want any of the wacky colors from the foam and such seeping through. That's better. Alright, let's remove that masking tape from the mouth and the funny sticker. The face is going to have to be repainted. And now it has, along with the joints, which I want to keep in black, so I had to paint over the highlights. Thus begins the paint job proper, starting by rusting things up. I used a pretty thin layer of rust paint, which turned out looking really nice with the underlying splatters and such from the zenithal highlight showing through. Before I finished painting the top, I wanted to give a rust wash to the underside. The color doesn't really show through when it's dried, and you don't really see this part anyways, so it might have been a waste of time. Regardless, the entire model is rusty now, or at least the parts that I wanted rusty.
I'm rusty.
Now we enter the Gilded Age. The joint pins, the claws, and a whole bunch of detail parts got picked out in gold. I didn't notice I had 2 different kinds of bottle caps till now, so a bit too late to change that. Next up is gunmetal, which goes on the guns on the back, along with some other details. I used that same paint for some dry brushing on this piece here, as well as the legs. Now I'm doing some cleanup work with the rust, covering up some accidental metallic paint, as well as some stuff that the primer didn't catch. And the same thing on the edges of the leg segments. Switching to the leg joints, I covered up some gold spillage along with bits like this where the shop towels had peeled up. Getting back to the metallic stuff, I added some copper paint to a bunch of parts. The power cable on the back turned into this giant copper tube. Now I've added some metallic blue to things in the back of the Scorpion, plus these power cells on the tail. The deodorant sticks on the back also got painted blue, acting as large fuel tanks for the robot. I also used the blue to try and create a burnt weathering effect on the inside of the cannon. I'll be painting the main body of the Scorpion this medium blue, stippling the paint on so it leaves a lot of the underlying rust layer exposed. Some Scorpions actually glow blue under ultraviolet light, so it's not too far-fetched to make it this color. And that's the main body painted. I used a couple different shades of blue for the rest of the thing. I really liked how the rust turned out, so I left a few panels unpainted. With the base colors all done, it's time to dry brush the metal stuff to give it some edge wear. Next up is the wash. I'm using a watered-down brown black mix to dirty things up. Like the dry brushing, this was done all over the model to make everything all grimy, rusty, or tarnished, depending on what the material is supposed to be. On the topic of tarnishing, I also hit all the copper parts with some green dry brushing to make them look oxidized. And that's the model done. Now it needs a base. I started with the same piece of cardboard I'd been using as a painting mat, and stuck a bunch more cardboard to it with some masking tape and Mod Podge. Next I taped on this box that I'd been using for spray painting. It kinda looks like terrain from the various textured spray paints I've been using, so I could use it as a decent starting point. Next I smothered a majority of the base with a texture paste made from sand, Mod Podge, and some paint, which was there more for visibility. I also added this motorcycle from the Top Gun Transformers figure for scale. Once the texture paste had cured, I hit the entire base with some brown and orange spray paint. After that, I gave the base a wash, which was supposed to be a dark sandy color to add some shadows, but it ended up being brighter than I intended and made the terrain look kinda muddy, which still looks alright. The motorcycle also got some color, which is not the best paint job in the world, but it's not the focus, so it's no big deal. And before Scorpio Maximus gets glued to the base, I'll give you one last look at the underside. And now it's finally done, just in time for Robot Day on Newgrounds. I'm very happy with how this turned out, and it was an absolute blast to put together, but I don't know where I'm gonna put it. The sheer size of this scratch build is honestly inhumane. I gotta turn the whole thing sideways just to get it through a doorway. And here it is along with a bunch of other stuff I've done for comparison. I think Scorpio Maximus is maybe twice the size of the Plague Machine by volume. The next time I do a scratch build, I'm definitely gonna do something smaller. Making giant stuff like this is cool, but it is not sustainable. But speaking of next time, next video is going to be something completely different. It's going to be something like a Vsauce video with Xavier Renegade Angel tier writing. Stay tuned for that if you're into that kind of deranged nonsense that actually kind of makes sense if you pay close attention. Thanks for watching, and don't think I forgot about you. You know too much now. And the easiest way to take care of that problem is simply to take you out of the picture.